Okay, Mr. Kruger, we're going to take a photo now for the record, so if you'll stand up, please, give me a big smile. Oh, no, not that big. Yeah, that's nice, yes. Give me a big smile. Oh, no, not that big. Yeah, that's nice, yes.
Barry Butters does James Bond GoldenEye. So over the years we've already seen a lot of changes with the franchise, but the biggest change this time around is that we've got a new actor in the role. Here's Brosnan, but at the same time in this film we also get a new Moneypenny as well as a new M. And behind the camera there's a bunch of changes too. We got a new director and a new producer. All of these radical changes had a lot of us worried at the time, but when the film came out it was a pleasant surprise. Pierce Brosnan assumes the role of Bond with a good deal of confidence and panache, while Martin Campbell offers Bond fans everything they come to expect from a Bond film, while updating the formula for the post-Cold War era of the 1990s.
This sort of thing takes a lot of getting used to. Today I had to ring most of them. My task and pleasure is to introduce him to the rest. Hey, are we going? Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, the new James Bond, Mr. Pierce Brosnan.
The name's Bond. James Bond. It's a hoot.
Now before we proceed, I just want to say a few words on the new Bond, Pierce Brosnan. The thing is, everyone's got their preferences for who their favourite James Bond is. And I won't go into this in too much detail here because I'll probably do a separate video on this at some later stage. But I think I can summarise my general feelings about the different Bond actors in this way. Put simply, I'd describe my opinion of Connery as positive, while my opinion of Lazenby is negative. But I'd describe my opinion of Moore as mixed. And that's all complicated by the fact that I like Roger Moore a lot as an actor, and I also really like the early films, particularly the first three. But personally I think things went off the rails slightly with Moonraker. And then I'd say my opinion of Dalton is very similar to my opinion of Connery, in that it's completely positive. Now my opinion of Pierce Brosnan is actually quite similar to my opinion of Roger Moore, insofar as I'd also describe my feeling as mixed. But it's mixed for quite different reasons. So while in general I think Pierce Brosnan makes for a pretty decent Bond, I do think there are some indications at times that he sort of overplays the role just slightly. Now some of this of course comes down to personal taste, because I think a lot of people really like the way he plays the role, but it's just not exactly my cup of tea. So I think Brosnan sort of revels a little too much in the role, which is sort of the opposite of how Dalton played the character. I think we see this new sort of characterisation of Bond with the opening car chase, because that sequence sort of establishes Pierce Brosnan's Bond as a danger-loving playboy, which is very much in contrast to the Dalton Bond. And as I implied at the start, I think he smiles a bit too much. This for me sort of falls into the category of a cheesy grin. There's also something about the way he moves around. Like I think this sort of movement tends to exhibit too much swagger. It's like he's trying a bit too hard to be cool, rather than just relaxing into the role like Sean Connery did. But then Sean Connery set a very high bar, and it's very hard for any other actor to live up to his example. But this is all balanced out by the fact that he looks absolutely perfect for the role. He is also a pretty decent actor. He can exhibit a very convincing emotional range. He has moments of levity.
She always did enjoy a good squeeze.
Moments of seriousness.
He was your friend, Trevelyan. And now he's your enemy and you will kill him. It is that simple.
In a word, yes.
And moments of sadness and regret.
The British betrayed them, sent them back to Stalin, who promptly had them all shot. Women, children, families.
Not exactly our finest hour.
And in addition to having a slightly less troubled version of Bond, the tone of this film also undergoes a similar shift. So this film scales back on the serious and gritty tone of the Dalton era, and it moves the Bond franchise back into some more familiar territory. So the tone of the classic Bond film is where you have an emphasis on adventure and suspense, but you throw in occasional moments of comedy to keep things light. It's actually sort of similar to the tone of the Connery Bonds, films like Goldfinger and You Only Live Twice. So in GoldenEye you've got mostly serious elements, but then you also throw in a few funny elements. We also see a sort of return to the sexual innuendo of the Moore era. GoldenEye does in fact push this element quite far, but it's all done with a sort of self-knowing irony, which is why it works.
Vodka martini. Shaken, not stirred. And for you?
The same.
How do you take it?
Straight up. With a twist.
And Bastard Bond is back too.
No. No more foreplay. Take me to hiatus.
So Pierce Brosnan's Bond definitely has a sort of edge to him, but it also contains a sort of internal critique.
What's the matter, James? No glib remark? No pithy comeback? Did you ever ask why? Why we toppled all those dictators, undermined all those regimes? Only to come home. Well done, good job, but sorry, old boy. Everything you risked your life and limb for has changed.
It was the job we were chosen for.
So GoldenEye is both a Bond film and a commentary on Bond films in general. So there's a type of richness and complexity to GoldenEye that we haven't really seen before. There's a lot of meat on the bone. It's a film that really respects its audience and demands a very thoughtful response. And from a more superficial perspective, GoldenEye also very much has the look and feel of a Bond film. Now in terms of the suits, Pierce Brosnan dresses in a very similar way to Timothy Dalton in The Living Daylights. That's to say that he tends to prefer darker suits like black or grey, although just like Timothy Dalton he does wear one cream suit, and then he also wears a DJ. And in terms of the firearms, Pierce Brosnan uses the PPK like a lot of the earlier Bonds. Sometimes he uses it with a silencer, and sometimes without. Like a lot of the classic Bonds from the past, this film also leans very heavily into the gadgets. First of all, at the start of the film, we see Bond using this grappling gun, and this also comes equipped with a laser. But then later on in the film, Bond's also got this laser gadget on his watch, and that comes in very handy when he needs to escape from this train that's about to explode. And Bond's also got this belt gadget, which is essentially another grappling tool. Like a lot of the earlier Bonds, you've also got this scene in Q's lab, where you see a lot of additional gadgets, like this airbag that's inside a telephone booth. We even see Q firing a rocket out of his leg, and we see this explosive pen, which comes in handy later on in the film. And we also see an ejector seat going off in the background. And in terms of the car, we see the return of the Aston Martin DB5 in this film. We saw an Aston Martin in The Living Daylights, of course, but it weren't a DB5. So this is a return to classic Bond iconography, which takes us all the way back to Goldfinger. Although later on in the film, Q gives Bond a new car, and this is a BMW Roadster. It's got a parachute braking system and Stinger missiles that fire out the front of the headlights. Although the funny thing is, Bond don't actually get to use these gadgets. In terms of the Bond girls, GoldenEye is actually quite similar to License to Kill, insofar as you've got two contrasting types. You've got the sort of wholesome nice girl Natalia, who provides a romantic interest, and then you've got Xenia Onatopp, who plays a very sexy and over-the-top femme fatale. Yeah, so those are the two Bond girls that we got this time. Very nice indeed. But this film's also very significant insofar as it introduces a new type of villain. This is a troubled and sympathetic villain. who's also a bit more three-dimensional and psychologically believable, because his motivation all stems from his backstory, and that includes a very troubled past. And because you understand his motivation, you do sometimes feel a degree of sympathy for him, because he's sort of been hard done by history.
We're both orphans, James. But where your parents had the luxury of dying in a climbing accident, mine survived the British betrayal and Stalin's execution squads.
So far I'd say we've had 4 different types of Bond villain. So briefly I think you can describe these 4 different types as the extortionist, the idealist, the sadist, and we can make up a new word for the last one. And this is what I like to call the grudgingist. The villain here is somewhat sympathetic, and he's motivated by personal grievance that actually makes sense. So this Bond film has quite a lot of moral complexity when you compare it to the earlier Bonds. The division between good and bad ain't so clear cut. But having said all that, we still got the basic opposition between Bond as a symbol of good and Trevelyan as a symbol of evil. Now the first thing to say about the supporting characters is that we got a new Moneypenny this time, played by Samantha Bond, and this brief scene shows the way in which they're trying to update Bond for the 1990s, because Moneypenny makes fun of James Bond's sexist ways.
You know, this sort of behaviour could qualify as sexual harassment.
Really? What's the penalty for that?
Someday you have to make good on your innuendos.
But the real revelation this time is with Judi Dench as M.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War, whose boyish charms, though wasted on me, obviously appeal to that young woman I sent out to evaluate you.
Point taken.
So we not only get the first female M, but we also get an acting masterclass, because Judi Dench is absolutely bloody brilliant, and in my opinion she's the best M since Bernard Lee. I think it's also worth pointing out that they were actually old friends, as Judi Dench explains.
I've been a huge Bond fan for years, and so, and also what is very nice is that Bernard Lee, who played M originally, was a great friend of mine, the first person I did a television with.
And this time around we see a slight softening of the relationship between Bond and Q, because rather than disapproving this time, Q actually laughs along with Bond.
Don't say it.
The writing's on the wall?
Along with the rest of him.
But guess what? There's no Felix Leiter this time, so we got to start the old countdown again. But we do get a Felix Leiter replacement, and that's the character of Jack Wade, and he's played by an actor who we've seen before, Joe Baker, who played the villainous Brad Whitaker in The Living Daylights.
Alright, you've had your 8, now I'll have my 80.
But anyway, his character is a sort of cross between Felix Leiter and J.W. Pepper. He's like Felix Leiter because he's a CIA operative, but then his character's more like J.W. Pepper, insofar as he's an American buffoon who's completely out of his depth.
Did you check her out?
Head to toe.
Right.
So, you're looking for a dish the size of a football field, huh? Doesn't exist. You can't light a cigar in Cuba without us seeing it.
Now this is a Bond film that really stands out for its great set pieces. There are just so many great standout scenes. The fight scenes, for example, are very visceral and solid. And there's also an absolutely brilliant variation on the car chase. This Bond film is also notable for stepping up the death count. The shootouts, for example, feature Bond killing quite large numbers of people. Now you're welcome to fact check me on this, but I think this film's got the highest number of daring escapes since Diamonds Are Forever. We see Bond breaking out of a prison, then we see him breaking out of an helicopter, then a train, and finally an enemy base. And like every other James Bond film, we've also got a fair number of explosions. Then you got a nice little sex scene. And by the way, it's not just a conquest this time. The scene actually feels quite sweet and romantic, and there's actually a very genuine sense of chemistry between the male and female leads.
When you told him to kill me, and that I meant nothing to you, did you mean it?
One last thing to say about this is the stunts in this film. Now this film probably features the least credible stunt in the franchise so far, and that's the airplane stunt at the start. I still quite like it and find it exciting, but it is a bit extreme. It does actually feel partly inspired by the stunt in Licence to Kill, but it raises the bar in terms of credibility. Now personally I do prefer the stunt in Licence to Kill, but I still like this one in GoldenEye. Even though it's pretty extreme, it's still very cool. Now I guess you could say that this tendency towards ever more elaborate stunts really started with the Roger Moore era, where Bond skied off the edge of a snowy mountain in The Spy Who Loved Me. Ever since then they were trying to wow audiences with ever more incredible stunts, but I think in the case of GoldenEye you could say that they went a bit too far. The thing is, the opening stunt sequence is very good, but it does suggest the direction of future Bond movies, particularly the Bond movies of the Brosnan era, where the stunts become ever more fantastical and eventually defy the laws of physics.
In Moscow, the hammer and sickle is lowered for the last time.
I mean, a lot of people seem to be quite anxious about whether a Bond film is appropriate for the 90s or something. Well, a 60s Bond film wouldn't be appropriate for the 90s, but this is a 90s Bond film, so it is appropriate.
The map has changed, Russia has changed, the whole sort of political spectrum has changed, and has Bond adapted?
Now, I haven't said much about the historical context too much in recent reviews, but this time it seems hard to avoid. So this is a Bond film that very much engages with the end of the Cold War and the collapse of the USSR. And in GoldenEye they do draw attention to this fact in various lines of dialogue.
You've been to Russia?
Not recently. I used to drop in occasionally. Shoot in and out.
It's very different now. A land of opportunity.
Another morning shut to hell. Free market economy, I swear it will be the end of me.
By the way, this is the first credit sequence that ain't done by Maurice Binder, and he'd been doing the credits since Dr. No. So this bloke called Daniel Kleinman took over, and he does a pretty bloody good job, I'd say, because the credit sequence in this film ties in very nicely with the themes of the movie, because it's filled with the iconography of the USSR, like the hammer and sickle for example, but then we see the crumbling statues of Lenin and Stalin, which reveals that this era has now come to an end. So this film don't shy away from the fact that the geopolitical climate has completely changed. This film also confronts another important historical change, because this is the first James Bond film to be set in the age of the internet.
Every day, America Online is making it easier for people to live, work, and play.
Hey, Dan, ready for the game? I'm just finishing up here with my new kayaking friends.
Kayaking friends on your computer?
Yeah, I just got America Online.
So you see things in the film like incoming email, which obviously you wouldn't have seen before. So as well as being a post-Cold War Bond, this is also a Bond that's set in the information age.
Boris! Boris!
What? I thought I'd post it on the internet, no?
This is the Bond girls of the 90s, and we really have to do the film more modern, so we have to do them strong. And it's up to us what we do of the characters. And I don't think we should ever change Bond because he should always be this a little bit difficult sexist. It's just up to us how we treat him.
Yeah, so the Bond girls are pretty solid this time around. The main girl, Natalia, is very likeable and three-dimensional. And she's probably my third favourite in the Bond franchise so far. So I put her just behind Tanya from Russia with Love and Kara from The Living Daylights. You've also got some very good emotional scenes in this film between Natalia and Bond, where Natalia has to sort of negotiate Bond's cold exterior.
Natalia, listen to me.
How can you act like this? How can you be so cold?
It's what keeps me alive.
But she actually does break through in the end, and then they have a nice little scene together. So I think the chemistry in this film is actually very believable, particularly in the sex scene, and then also with this very minor scene in the plane.
Turn 10 degrees south, bearing 184.
Yes, sir.
I think scenes like this create a genuine sense of two people getting to know one another and growing closer as they face adversity together.
I can be outrageous, I can be bigger, I can be all the things that I would like to be sometimes in life that I can never get away with.
Famke's character is totally outrageous. She has sex with men and she crushes them with her thighs. She really went in there and just played it to the hilt.
Meanwhile, Onatop is very much like a comic book character, because she pushes the femme fatale idea very far indeed. So Onatop is the most over-the-top femme fatale that we've seen so far in the Bond franchise. Of course, we have had femme fatale characters like this before, characters who seem to derive a certain amount of sexual pleasure from inflicting cruelty. But Onatop takes this a stage further.
I can't breathe.
In fact, I do think we have to mention Fatima Blush in this context, because I feel like she's the actual biggest influence on this character. So I think this character is partly inspired by this unofficial character from an unofficial James Bond film.
You're quite a man, Mr. James Bond. But I am a superior woman. Guess where you gathered the first one.
Yeah, so in summary, I'd say the Bond girls are pretty good in this film. And as I mentioned earlier in the review, I think all of this is quite reminiscent of Licence to Kill, insofar as you got this basic opposition between a nice girl and a naughty girl. Now, of course, there ain't really anything to say about the source material this time, because the thing is, there isn't any. This is a completely original screenplay that doesn't use any material from Fleming. So despite the fact that it's not based on any Fleming material, GoldenEye still feels very much like a James Bond film. I think part of the reason is that it's got all the usual iconography, as well as the same sort of set pieces and supporting characters. But it also borrows a lot of ideas from earlier Bond films. So like in the first James Bond film Dr. No, James Bond plays Baccarat with a female card player.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench.
6. Madame loses.
And like Goldfinger, Bond races a female driver around a windy road in an Aston Martin. Like You Only Live Twice, Bond discovers an enemy base that's hidden under a lake or a volcano.
Emergency crews to stations.
No wonder we couldn't see it.
Like Diamonds Are Forever, the plot involves a weaponised satellite. In Diamonds it's a laser weapon, and in GoldenEye it's an EMP weapon. And like in A View to a Kill, a villain threatens to frame Bond for a murder he didn't commit.
What have they done?
You discharged her. So she and her accomplice came here to kill you. Then they set fire to the office.
Defense Minister Dmitry Mishkin, murdered by British agent James Bond.
And there's another similarity to A View to a Kill, because the villain is also interested in EMP technology.
Magnetic pulse?
Yes, Minister. One burst in outer space over the UK and everything with a microchip in it, from, well, the modern toaster to the most sophisticated computers and our defense systems, would be rendered absolutely useless.
Set off a nuclear device in the upper atmosphere. Creates a pulse, a radiation surge that destroys everything with an electronic circuit.
The idea being to knock out the enemy's communications for he, she, or they could retaliate.
And like loads of James Bond films before, this film ends with an exploding enemy base and Bond hugging and kissing a glamorous girl after they've escaped. Yeah, so I regard GoldenEye as a very successful reinvention of the Bond formula for the 1990s. It serves up everything that Bond fans really love, but with a new type of self-knowing irony mixed in with the recipe. It's very clever and it's very sharp writing. This film also managed to figure out how you continue with the Bond franchise after the Cold War was over. This achievement is all that much more impressive because of all the staff changes. Staff changes that went on both behind of and in front of the camera. Yeah, so GoldenEye is a very clever reinvention of Bond for the 1990s. It enters into a dialogue with PC culture, but at the same time it don't exactly succumb to it, because Bond is still Bond, despite the fact that the world has moved on. Yeah, so this film's very solid in terms of its treatment of the Bond girl, and it's got an absolutely superb villain. It's also got an intriguing story with just the right amount of complexity. So in a nutshell, I'd say GoldenEye is a very successful update. But I think a broader point here is something that this film reveals about the Bond franchise more generally, and that's its ability to rise from the ashes and reinvent itself. Because GoldenEye ain't afraid to embrace change, but at the same time it also has the confidence to insist on its own identity. While I think this film is brilliant, I don't think it's quite perfect, and I'd say there are two reasons for this. One is my slight reservation about Brosnan himself, and I'll probably have more to say about that over the course of the next 3 films. But any other point is that I'd say the Bond girls are good this time, without being quite as top tier as some of the great Bond girls that we've seen over the years. Bond girls like Tanya in From Russia with Love, and Cara in The Living Daylights. But anyway, we've had a pretty good run over the last 3 films. So the James Bond franchise is on a real winning streak at this point. We've had quality productions with great performances, stunning set pieces, and mature geopolitical intrigue. And you can't really ask for much more. So can this winning streak be maintained for much longer? Well, we'll just have to see. But for now, all that it remains for me to say is that that's 17 down and 8 to go. And this is Barry Butters signing out, and enjoy the rest of your day.
On the top.
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 Give me a big smile. Oh, no, not that big.